Welcome to Washington Today for June 6th, 2022. I'm Gary Starikoff. Thanks for joining us today. Here are some headlines. Lawmakers return to both sides of Capitol Hill this week as a bipartisan group of senators continue talks on a potential gun violence package, and the House January 6th committee prepares to unveil its findings in primetime hearings on Thursday. And late word this afternoon that the committee has announced a second public hearing that's set for Monday, June 13th. We'll hear from leading members on both issues coming up. The Justice Department has announced it has charged Enrique Tarrio, head of the extremist group the Proud Boys, along with 4 others with seditious conspiracy in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. The charges are the most aggressive brought by the Justice Department against the Proud Boys and are the first allegations by prosecutors that the group tried to forcefully disrupt the presidential transfer of power. The developments come after Charles Donahoe, a Proud Boy member from North Carolina, pleaded guilty in April and agreed to cooperate with the investigation. He was not named in this afternoon's indictment. The Justice Department has brought one other seditious conspiracy case. That's against the leaders of another far-right extremist group, the Oath Keepers. They are accused of extensively planning and preparing for violence on January 6th. In London, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has won his confidence vote in the House of Commons, with 211 members voting for him and 148 against him. All he needed was a simple majority of 180. The vote comes after months of turmoil for the Prime Minister over illegal parties held in and around 10 Downing Street during Britain's official COVID-19 lockdowns, and mean that Boris Johnson will remain both as leader of the ruling Conservative Party and as Prime Minister. We'll hear from Conservative MP Graham Brady coming up. And 7 states are holding primary elections tomorrow, including in California, which has a top 2 system. That's where the top 2 vote getters, regardless of party, advance to the general election. 2 Democratic incumbents, Governor Gavin Newsom and Senator Alex Padilla, are in strong position to win their races. Other Golden State races to watch: the 40th Congressional District, where incumbent Republican Young Kim is facing a challenge on the right from Greg Raths, and the 22nd District, where incumbent Republican David Valadao has gotten pushback for supporting Donald Trump's second impeachment from his challenger, Chris Mathis. We begin on Capitol Hill today, more than 500 days after the violent attack on the U.S. Capitol. The House January 6th committee is set to go public. The committee will hold its first public hearing on June 9th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time as committee members question key witnesses about what transpired and why during the January 6, 2021 assault on the U.S. Capitol. CNN.com is reporting today that, quote, the committee presentations will likely feature video clips from January 6th, as well as some of the roughly 1,000 interviews the committee has conducted behind closed doors. Committee member and Maryland Democrat Jamie Raskin talked with the Washington Post today about what to expect from Thursday's hearing.
You use that word conspiracy. Your colleague, Representative Liz Cheney, she used that over the weekend in a separate interview. So did a federal judge, David Carter. He said that it was more likely than not that Donald Trump was part of a conspiracy to overturn the elections. So is that what the hearing is going to lay out? Is that what the committee has found?
Yes, the committee has found evidence of concerted planning and premeditated activity. The idea that all of this was just a rowdy demonstration that spontaneously got a little bit out of control is absurd. You don't almost knock over the U.S. government by accident. So we're going to lay out all of the evidence we have found. House Resolution 503 charges us with defining what happened on January 6th, explaining the causes of what happened, and then ultimately laying out recommendations that would allow us to fortify ourselves against coups and insurrections moving forward.
And is Donald Trump the center of this conspiracy? Are you able to connect those dots?
Well, people are going to have to make judgments themselves about the relative role that different people played. But I think that Donald Trump and the White House were at the center of these events. That's the only way really of making sense of them all. Of course, the House and the Senate in bicameral and bipartisan fashion, have already determined that the former president, Donald Trump, incited an insurrection by majority votes in the House and the Senate, although Donald Trump wasn't convicted by the requisite 2/3 majority, but commanding majorities found that he had in fact incited this insurrection. But the Select Committee has found evidence about a lot more than incitement here, and we are going to be laying out the evidence about all of the actors who were pivotal to what took place on January 6th.
And the New York Times reporting on Friday that Mark Short, chief of staff to former Vice President Mike Pence, warned the vice president's lead Secret Service agent the day before the attack that there could be a threat against Mr. Pence. Here's more from Representative Raskin.
I want to focus on Vice President Mike Pence, who was a critical person in the lead up and on January 6th. Does the committee plan to call him in to testify?
Well, we've not been speaking publicly about what our plans are with respect to specific witnesses and potential witnesses, so I can't comment on that.
What about some of the people who were very close to him, like his top counsel, Greg Jacobs, or his chief of staff, Mark Short? Could they be potential witnesses in the hearings this month?
Again, I don't want to enter into specifics, but look, we have wanted to make sure that we get as much information as possible from as many material witnesses as possible. We want to figure out exactly what happened. And, Vice President Pence was obviously the object of this political onslaught on January 6th. So we need to fill in the details as much as possible about what happened there. As I understand it, the purpose was to try to get Pence to exercise these totally unprecedented and lawless unilateral powers asserted by Donald Trump that Pence had to reject electoral college votes. In other words, they wanted him to just single-handedly nullify the votes of tens of millions of people from Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, perhaps Nevada, New Mexico. And that would have either just clinched it for Donald Trump in the Electoral College, or what it would have done is to create a situation where nobody had a majority in the Electoral College votes cast. And if that were the case under the 12th Amendment, it would have kicked the entire contest into the House of Representatives. And, if you ask why they would want the House under Speaker Pelosi and Democratic control deciding who would be president and the Senate deciding who would be vice president under the 12th Amendment, well, they understood perfectly that under the 12th Amendment, we would be voting not on the basis of one member, one vote, which is how we usually vote, of course, but on the basis of one state delegation, one vote. And they understood that after the 2020 elections, the GOP was in control of 27 state delegations. The Democrats have 22 state delegations, and one state, Pennsylvania, is split down the middle with 9-9. So that would have allowed, theoretically, for a 27-22-1 vote. Even had they suffered the defection of Wyoming's at-large representative, they still would have had 26 votes. And this is something that Donald Trump was very clearly aware of. There was a lot of talk about a contingent election under the 12th Amendment. And, that could have been done in conjunction with some kind of invocation of the Insurrection Act, because that was another line that was being pushed hard by a number of people in Trump's inner circle. So we'll talk about the Insurrection Act and the possibility that martial law also could have resulted from those events. But as you say, Vice President Pence did the right thing. When we got out to the floor at 1 o'clock on January 12th, all of us were presented with a memo that Vice President Pence had written explaining why he could not do what Donald Trump was trying to force him to do, which was to reject electoral college votes, return them to the states. There was no provision for any of that in the 12th Amendment or in the Electoral Count Act. So he did the right thing on that day. He said he could not do that, and for his work and for maintaining his oath, he was driven out of the Capitol with a by a mob chanting, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence."
House January 6th committee member and Maryland Democrat Jamie Raskin speaking with Washington Post Live anchor Leanne Caldwell. You can see this entire event at cspan.org. It's also on our C-SPAN Now video app. The committee's vice chair, Liz Cheney, is also talking about what to expect from Thursday's hearing. The Wyoming Republican told Robert Costa from CBS News that she believes the insurrection is an ongoing threat.
Congresswoman, are you confident that what you have found as a committee will somehow grab the American people by the lapels and say, wake up, you have to pay attention?
I am. The threat, and it's an ongoing threat. We are not in a situation where former President Trump has expressed any sense of remorse about what happened. We are, in fact, in a situation where he continues to use even more extreme language, frankly, than the language that caused the attack. And so people must pay attention. People must watch, and they must understand how easily our democratic system can unravel if we don't defend it. We have too many people now in the Republican Party who are not taking their responsibilities seriously and who have pledged their allegiance and loyalty to Donald Trump. I mean, it is fundamentally antithetical. It is contrary to everything conservatives believe to embrace a personality cult. And yet, that is what so many in my party are doing today.
Is the Republican Party a personality cult?
I think that large segments of it have certainly become that.
A cult?
Yeah. I mean, I think there is absolutely a cult of personality around Donald Trump. And I think that, the majority of Republicans across the country don't want to see our system unravel. They understand how important it is to protect and defend the Constitution. Let me say it this way. I have not learned anything that has made me less concerned.
Well, what's made you more concerned?
Well, I think the extent, the expanse, how broad this multi-pronged effort was.
Was it a conspiracy?
I think certainly. I mean, look, if you look at the court filings,
do you believe it was a conspiracy?
I do. It is extremely broad. It's extremely well organized. It's really chilling.
Liz Cheney was once the third-ranking Republican in the House of Representatives, but a year ago, she was voted out of leadership because of her criticism of former President Trump. She also angered House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy when she joined the January 6th committee. Leader McCarthy, who was recently subpoenaed by the committee, has called it illegitimate. Representative Cheney says her fight is a proxy for a crisis in her party.
Is this moment a moral test for the Republican Party?
Absolutely. No question. And right now we're failing. In my state, the state party chairman is a member of the Oath Keepers. He was here on January 6th. He was here with a walkie-talkie in his hand on January 6th. That is a mortal threat, and it is a moral test. We can't fail that moral test, but there are too many right now in my party who are failing it.
While some Democrats have embraced Cheney's cause, the 55-year-old mother of five has conservative credentials she has forged over decades. She's against abortion rights, pro-fossil fuels, backed by supporters of gun rights, an unflinching hawk on foreign policy, and she voted with Trump some 90% of the time. And then there's her father, who was Wyoming's House member for a decade. As vice president, Dick Cheney was seen as so conservative and menacing to Democrats that some called him Darth Vader. And yet on January 6th of this year, Dick Cheney was one of the few Republicans to attend the House commemoration of the Capitol attack.
We sat down and we were in the front row of the House chamber, and he looked behind him. We were on the Republican side, and he turned back to me and he said, it's one thing to sort of watch the news and to read about what's happened to our party. He said it is really another thing to be here and to look and see all these empty seats and not see another Republican here.
House January 6th Committee Vice Chair Liz Cheney from Wyoming. She's a Republican talking to Robert Costa from CBS News. With more on what to expect on Thursday, here's Politico's senior legal affairs reporter Kyle Cheney.
What was what do you think the format of this hearing will be? They have findings to share. Will they have witnesses on Thursday night as well?
So we actually don't really know. I suspect they will. They haven't announced any witnesses. They've kept a lot of the details close to their vest, and I think they want to have maximum impact, which is why they're trying to sort of keep some of this a little bit mysterious as long as they can. But I do suspect we'll see sort of different topic areas each of the hearings that will break down the different lanes of their investigation. So that's what I'd be watchful for right now. Do
you have any idea on the numbers of people that they have, the committee has interviewed, obviously in private, ahead of this hearing? And does that give us who they might be, and does that give us an indication of where they're headed in this investigation?
Yeah, I mean, they've interviewed over 1,000 people in their telling. I think we only know of maybe a couple hundred of who those people are, just based on tracking the committee, who's talking to some of them, their lawyers and all that. So, but we do know that they've got some very distinct lines of inquiry, things about, what was Donald Trump doing in the preceding January 6th and attempting to overturn the election, some focus on domestic extremism, groups like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers who were involved in the violence at the Capitol, and some of the money trail. So there's different lanes, again, of their investigation that I think we'll see broken out in these hearings.
We mentioned that this is a select committee. This is not a permanent standing committee selected by the leaders, in this case, the speaker. But tell us about the genesis of the committee and particularly the choice of the Republican members of the select committee.
Sure. So this committee was never supposed to exist. This was, after the attack, first of all, there was bipartisan outrage at what happened, which somewhat retreated a little bit as Donald Trump kind of reasserted his grip over the Republican Party. But what you initially saw was a call for a bipartisan commission, like the 9/11 commission, that would independently investigate this and come up with some findings that were free of sort of the partisan rancor. But Republicans ended up sinking that legislation. And what happened instead was Speaker Pelosi said, we can't have no investigation. We have to have some investigation. So I'm going to appoint a select committee. And what happened there was it was supposed to be 9 Democratic appointees and 5 Republican appointees. I believe was a breakdown, or maybe it was 7 and 5. And when Minority Leader McCarthy made his 5 picks to the panel, Pelosi actually vetoed 2 of them, which is within her power to do. She said Jim Jordan and Jim Banks don't belong on this committee. Because of that, Leader McCarthy decided, I'm just going to withdraw all 5 of my picks and boycott the committee altogether. So what we've had is, as he noted, a committee appointed entirely by Speaker Pelosi.
To the timeline of this select committee, Kyle, they'll hold the hearing on Thursday. Are more expected, and when do they want to wrap up their work and publish their findings?
So we're anticipating around 6 hearings, maybe as many as 8. They've kind of vacillated, and I think that will remain in flux depending on how the hearings go, depending on which witnesses they get to confirm. I think, again, we still don't really know much about who they're going to call, but we expect some high-profile names eventually. But one thing that's very important is this is not the end of the road for them. They're talking about a timeline that involves releasing their actual report in September. That could change too. Everything very fluid for them, and certain things that may even extend beyond then. Some legal fights they're having to try to get more information that could go into October and maybe even beyond the midterm elections.
As Thursday's hearing comes up, who are some of the members you'll be watching most closely?
So, I mean, the obvious ones are Chairman Benny Thompson and Vice Chair Liz Cheney. And Cheney, I would say even more so because, as the lead, one of 2 Republicans on the committee and maybe the most, one of the most prominent leadership role on this committee, how she messages the results here and tries to connect with Republicans at home, who may or may not be tuning into these hearings at all. She has pulled no punches about her own colleagues and their complicity in what happened leading up to January 6th. And the way she talks about Republican involvement in this is a very important message because it doesn't connect. It connects differently than Democrats calling out Donald Trump when you hear her doing it.
What about other members on the committee? Who do you expect the toughest questioning to come from?
Look, I think Jamie Raskin is an interesting one to watch. He led the second impeachment of Donald Trump related to January 6th. And so he's been, his involvement here. Adam Schiff similarly led the first impeachment of Donald Trump. So these two have a long history of pursuing and intensive investigations of the former president. I think Zoe Lofgren is another one. She was involved in multiple impeachments throughout her career, including the Nixon impeachment as a House staffer.
Right.
So she's seen the whole gamut of high-profile investigations like this.
Politico's senior legal affairs reporter Kyle Cheney on this morning's Washington Journal. You can see more at cspan.org/WJ and also on our C-SPAN Now video app. And you can watch our live coverage of the House January 6th committee hearings Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on C-SPAN. We'll also have them for you here on C-SPAN Radio. You can also see it on C-SPAN Now and anytime online at cspan.org. And as we said, the committee has announced a second public meeting for Monday, June 13th. President Biden is traveling to Los Angeles this week, where world leaders will meet for the Summit of the Americas. And earlier today, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador announced he would skip the summit because the White House did not invite the leaders of Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. At her daily briefing with reporters, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre answered questions about the summit.
Okay, I just have two questions. So given the people who are not going to the summit, President of Mexico, President of Honduras, who the Vice President recently spoke directly to, what does it say about the strength of U.S. influence in the region of these people deciding they don't want to go?
Yeah, let me just speak to the President of Mexico very quickly, because I have something in there for you. We have had candid engagement with President López Obrador, as well with other regional partners, for more than a month regarding the issue of invitations to the summit. It is important to acknowledge that there are a range of views on this question in our hemisphere, as there are in the United States. The president's principled position is that we do not believe that dictators should be invited, which is the reason that the president has decided not to attend. We look forward to hosting Foreign Secretary Ebrard as the Mexican representative, and we welcome Mexico's significant contribution to the summit, to the major summit deliverables. President Biden and the First Lady look forward to welcoming President Obrador and the First Lady of Mexico to Washington in July for a bilateral visit. At that meeting, President Biden and President Obrador will have the opportunity to carry the work forward for the summit. To your actual question, I just wanted to make sure I dealt with Mexico because we had a little announcement there. The U.S. remains the most powerful force in driving hemispheric actions to address core challenges facing the people of the Americas: inequality, health, climate, and food security. And so the president continues to be a leader in the hemisphere.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at the White House earlier today at the daily briefing. The U.S. is hosting the Summit of the Americas for the first time since it launched in 1994. The summit's theme is, quote, building a sustainable, resilient, and equitable future. You're listening to Washington Today.
After months of closed-door investigations, the House January 6th committee is set to go public starting Thursday, June 9th at 8 p.m. Eastern. Tune in to C-SPAN Radio as committee members question key witnesses about what transpired and why during the assault on the U.S. Capitol. Live coverage June 9th, 8 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN Radio, on the free C-SPAN Now app, or on your smart speaker by saying play C-SPAN Radio.
Welcome back to Washington Today. Here are more headlines. The Louisiana State Senate has given final approval to a bill that would ban most abortions and impose criminal penalties on the doctors who perform them. The bill strengthens the state's so-called trigger law. It would ban abortion in most cases for rape or incest, but does allow an exception for the mother's life. Doctors who perform abortions would also be subject to criminal penalties. Louisiana is one of more than a dozen states that have trigger laws that will take effect if the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade. The bill now goes to Democratic Governor John Bel Edwards' desk. He is expected to sign it. The Supreme Court announced an additional opinion day this week. It'll be Wednesday, June 8th. Decisions will be released online at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The court has 30 decisions left for this term. And Bloomberg's Greg Stohr is reporting that the court has handed down decisions in fewer than half of its cases this term so far. That's the furthest behind the court has been by this point in the calendar since at least 1950. President Biden has ordered emergency measures to increase U.S. manufacturing of solar panels. He also declared a 2-year tariff exemption on panels imported from Southeast Asia. The White House said in a fact sheet that the move would make sure the U.S. has access to enough solar energy parts to meet consumer and industry demand. The Commerce Department is currently investigating whether solar panel makers in Southeast Asia are being used to circumvent U.S. tariffs on Chinese-made solar parts, and that has slowed down the solar energy industry in the U.S. New York Governor Kathy Hochul signed legislation today that prohibits New Yorkers under age 21 from buying semi-automatic rifles. It was one of 10 gun-related bills passed in the New York legislature. They also include measures to require microstamping on new firearms and revising the state's red flag law. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has won his confidence vote in the House of Commons, with 211 members voting for him and 148 against him. All he needed was a simple majority of 180. It comes after months of turmoil for the Prime Minister over illegal parties held in and around 10 Downing Street during Britain's official COVID-19 lockdowns. The vote means that Boris Johnson will remain as leader of both the ruling Conservative Party and Prime Minister. Here's Conservative MP Graham Brady announcing the results in London.
Good evening. I can report as returning officer that 359 ballots were cast, no spoiled ballots, that the vote in favour of having confidence in Boris Johnson as leader was 211 votes, and the vote against was 148 votes. And therefore, I can announce that the Parliamentary Party does have confidence.
The vote reflects 58% of Conservative MPs supported the Prime Minister. Now, that's a lower number than former Prime Minister Theresa May, who had the support of 63% of lawmakers when she faced a confidence vote from the Conservative Party in 2018. She survived just 6 months further in her job before ultimately being forced to resign. Back here in Washington, we mentioned the January 6th committee has announced a second public hearing. That is on Monday, June 13th. Well, gun violence is also on the agenda in Congress. The House will return tomorrow and is expected to vote later in the week on a package of gun safety measures. Among them are increasing the federal age limit from 18 to 21 to buy semi-automatic rifles. The Senate gavelled back in today at 3 p.m. Eastern, and while senators will spend most of the week working on legislation expanding health care and disability benefits for veterans exposed to toxic burn pits, a bipartisan group of 9 senators are also continuing their talks on gun violence proposals. The negotiations come after the latest high-profile mass shooting over the weekend in Philadelphia, where at least 3 people were killed and 12 were wounded when a gunman fired into a crowd on the city's popular South Street corridor. Here's Pennsylvania Senator Republican Pat Toomey.
I know you're optimistic. Will you produce something here?
Cautiously. Cautiously, Bill. This is a big challenge, and one thing I want to be clear about, sometimes we lump all of these killings into one category when in fact they're very, very different in their nature. Some of these are gangs fighting each other over turf and in their respective drug businesses. In other cases, of course, it's these horrific, sensationalized cases of a deranged young man who goes in and mows down innocent civilians. So these are very, very different circumstances. What I'm trying to do is see if we can have some common sense measures that make it less likely for dangerous criminals and the dangerously mentally ill to get firearms while protecting the constitutional Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens.
Okay, on that answer, give me
it's a tough, narrow path, but I think...
Give me what you would consider common sense solutions.
Yeah. So for one, I've long believed that we could expand background checks to include all commercial sales. So sales at gun shows, sales that are advertised over the internet, sales that are in a sense commercial in nature, and the seller doesn't know the buyer. a background check makes sense. They can be done very quickly. Most firearm purchases do require background checks today. We could expand it to all commercial sales. I think that would make sense. I think making it a federal offense to engage in trafficking of guns, like knowingly purchasing guns for someone who is legally not permitted to buy a gun and handing it over to that person, that's illegal. That should be prosecuted. I think we could do more to make schools more secure. We could do things in the mental health space, and maybe we could encourage states to have red flag laws so that there would be a way to address someone who's about to go off the rails. These are the kinds of things that are under discussion.
Okay. If you expanded your criminal background checks, Sandy Hook could have still happened. Yeah. If you expand criminal background checks,
Bill,
what happened in Uvalde, Texas could still have happened.
Yeah. Hey, Bill, let me just, I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me be very clear. There's no panacea here. There is no one thing that will prevent mass killings. All we can hope for, in my view, is on the margins, make it more difficult for someone who's dangerously mentally ill or someone who's a violent criminal to buy a firearm, and hope that there's some kind of intervention in the meantime. A determined criminal is going to be able to eventually get a gun. I understand that, but that doesn't mean there's nothing we can do to make it harder for that person to get a gun.
Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey, one of the Republican leaders in the ongoing Senate negotiations, talking to Fox News' Bill Hemmer. And lead Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut also talking about the state of negotiations. Here he is with NBC News' Chuck Todd.
Listen, I think we've been making progress every single day. Our goal is to get an agreement by the end of the week, but I think we'll take the time necessary. Remember, we're trying to get broad consensus, Republicans and Democrats. We are talking about doing something substantial. I hear the skepticism about how big this package can be, but I'm not going to support anything that doesn't save lives. I'm not going to support something that just checks a box. And so in order to get a bill that makes a meaningful difference, it's going to take a little bit of time. Our hope, our goal is by the end of the week, but we'll take the time that we need.
There seem to be 4 categories that's been reported on. I want to see if you'll confirm them. Getting rid of some of the loopholes in the background check system. Obviously not all of them, it sounds like. The red flag law, not a federal one. Is this about incentivizing states to pass their own, or a federal one?
I actually don't think it'd be a good idea to have a federal red flag law. I think it'd be very inaccessible for local law enforcement to have to go into the federal court system. So I support state laws. I think they need some guidance and some funding in order to implement these laws and make sure that everybody knows how to access
Carrot
them.
and stick. So for instance, everybody had to raise the drinking age to 21 in order to get your highway funds back in the 80s. Would it be something like that with the red flag laws?
I think we're talking about carrots.
Okay, all carrots in this case. School security, what does that mean?
No definition on that yet. There's no doubt there's going to be an increased appetite from school districts to both harden their physical security and invest in security personnel. I think there's bipartisan agreement that we should try to help schools with that. That's part of the discussions.
And then this investment in mental health, what is realistic? What's on the table of this mental health spending?
Well, I think you know how I sort of feel about the intersection of the conversation between mental health and gun violence. I sort of submit that we don't have any more mental illness in this country than any other high-income nation. We have all of the gun violence. And so I don't necessarily make the connection between mental illness and violence in the way that some of my colleagues do. But we have a broken mental health system in this country, and so we should try to fix it. We are right now fleshing out some of the investments we could make. I think obviously it will be and should be targeted on the juvenile population, on the profile of these mass shooters, which tend to always be in this 18 to 25 range. I think we can come to agreement on that as well.
Connecticut Democratic Senator Chris Murphy talking with NBC News' Chuck Todd. And finally, today at the White House, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden helped unveil a new postage stamp that honors former First Lady Nancy Reagan. The Nancy Reagan Forever stamp shows Mrs. Reagan dressed in her signature red gown. It was based on her official 1987 White House portrait. Nancy Reagan's niece, Ann Peterson, Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, and Fred Ryan, the chairman of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute, were also there. Dr. Biden praised her predecessor at the event today as someone who served the American people with grace.
There really is nothing that can prepare you to be First Lady. To wake up here steps from the Oval Office to sit in the Jackie Kennedy Garden and watch the morning light just climb the monuments of our nation's capital. First ladies aren't elected. We have really no instructions to guide us. We're just sort of thrust into the national spotlight in a way that I know none of us could have anticipated. Yet each day is such a blessing to serve the American people with such an incredible platform. First Lady Nancy Reagan served the American people with grace. She understood that the role of First Lady came with inherent pitfalls and scrutiny. Yet she found the humanity in it all. She knew the potential of this role. She traveled the country listening to Americans' stories and just brought them home to her husband. She raised attention on issues that she cared about, and she spoke bravely about her cancer, as was mentioned, and her mastectomy. Next month would have been Mrs. Reagan's 101st birthday, ending her centennial year. And with this stamp, we are affirming that she made such a difference. You know, we can all change the world in big ways and small ones. And Mrs. Reagan reminds us that we need both. It's up to each of us to find small, everyday ways we can bring our communities together. You know, we never know what's behind someone's smile, how much they might need our kindness or our strength. So we must find our own ways to be a shoulder to lean on, be an ear to listen when someone feels alone. We have to learn from those we don't understand, to reach across the divide and find common ground.
You can see the entire event at cspan.org. It's also on our free video app, C-SPAN Now. Nancy Reagan, who died in 2016 at age 94, is just one of 5 former First Ladies to appear on forever stamps. Lady Bird Johnson was the last one to be recognized back in 2012. The new stamp will be available on July 6th, which would be Nancy Reagan's 101st birthday. A reminder that this program is available as a podcast. You can find it at cspan.org/podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like more on the stories that are shaping Washington, delivered daily right to your inbox, you can subscribe to C-SPAN's evening newsletter, word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thanks a lot for listening today to Washington Today.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Every day we take your calls live on the air on the news of the day, and we discuss policy issues that impact you. Coming up Tuesday morning, Steve Gutowski of The Reload discusses congressional efforts to address gun violence. And then Mother Jones Washington Bureau Chief David Korn talks about this week's January 6th committee hearings. Watch Washington Journal live at 7 Eastern Tuesday morning on C-SPAN or on C-SPAN Now, our free mobile video app. Join the discussion with your phone calls, Facebook comments, texts, and tweets.